Hi, I'm Paul Westsells, President and CEO of Western Copper and Gold. Western Copper and Gold is a single asset development company. We're developing the Casino Copper Gold project located up in the Yukon. This is a tremendous asset. It's actually the largest critical minerals development project in Canada. It's got close to 11 billion pounds of copper, 21 million ounces of gold. We just issued a feasibility study last year, less than a year ago, showing a 2.3 billion net present value and 18.1% IRR, both after tax. We brought in Rio Tinto a couple of years ago as a strategic investor. We just brought in Mitsubishi Materials as a strategic investor. It's a very exciting time in the company, and I'm very excited to be here and talking.
Good to see you. Good to have you back, Paul. September since we last spoke to you, and been busy, been very, very busy. Look, I want to sort of point to the size and the scale of this project for people new to this story. Okay, so it's a super big project, and with super big projects come super big capex requirements. Okay. State that it's obvious, but what you've done is you've come a couple of things with Rio in terms of advancing those negotiations before we discuss Mitsubishi. So what more has Rio done to kind of commit to you since we last spoke in September?
Yeah, no, and excellent question. I mean, so Rio's initial investment was really an investment to take a deeper look into the project. So, we signed an agreement with them in May 2021. Started to do some work with them. The way that the agreement was structured is that we spend a year and a half working together, and if they like what they see, they renew for a year. That happened last November. They renewed for a year. The other provision on the agreement was that if we did any other financing and began to dilute them, they had the opportunity to sort of maintain their position. That just happened. That was announced yesterday morning, where they based on the Mitsubishi investment, they elected to top up. That brought in, it's another $2.3 million. It's not a huge investment, but more importantly, it's that continued commitment from Rio Tinto. And, I know this, I'm working, I talk to them, every week. We're working very closely together. These are things I know, but it's, nice that I can point, look, here's, the proof is in the pudding here. The proof is in the checks that they're continuing to write, and just had one of those announced yesterday.
Right. So they continue to put money in. They continue want to work with you. That gives them, I think I think the announcement talks about 7.84% of the company. And I want to come back to what that means and what that gives them options to do further down the line. But you've just had Mitsubishi Materials come in, was obviously part of the Mitsubishi group for $21.3 million. So what's their expectation of what they're buying into?
Yeah, so Mitsubishi, it's been a very interesting sort of journey with Mitsubishi. So we first started talking to them again about a year ago. They told us at that time, look, Paul, we like development projects. Obviously, they're into copper. We're looking at a whole number. And you're like, okay, I'm on their list. That's great. Then we talked to them at the end of the summer, and they said, look, you're on the short list. We want to come to site. We spent a week up at site in the Yukon, meaning the government, going down to the port. Very, very a deep sort of, site visit. Then at the end of the year, last year, they said, look, you're at the top of our list. We really want to do something. And we went to them and said, look, we're sort of, part of the way through this work with Rio Tinto. We offered them essentially the same thing. Come in as a strategic investor. We'll work through, we'll work through some of your concerns and go forward from that. So where that ended up is they're now a 5% investor with the $21.3 million that they invested. And, we've got a work program laid out. It's a lot of looking at concentrates, making sure that we completely understand, what the concentrates are going to look like coming out of the mine. A few other things, but we're really excited to have them. And one of the things I'm going to point out, Mitsubishi, has a long history of working with Rio Tinto. They're partners on Escondida along with BHP. They, Rio Tinto along with Freeport were partners with Mitsubishi Materials at Grasberg. Rio Tinto has since exited that. So they know each other well. When I talked to Rio right after the investment by Mitsubishi Materials, they were like, thumbs up, great partner, great name to have in the story. So very, very positive.
Okay, so they're used to working together, so there's no competitive tension. This is people who work together. Have they got an aligned thought about how they want to work with you? I mean, because different groups have they have different parts to the group, obviously. So has Mitsubishi Materials worked with this part of Rio Tinto that you were working with before?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm working with the copper group, and that's the group that Mitsubishi Materials knows. So they absolutely, it's the two groups that know each other. So a couple of things. I mean, you're right, it's not an immediate competitive tension. However, Mitsubishi, I mean, they're after the offtake. Mitsubishi Materials typically won't make a bid for an entire company. They like to be, a sub 50% owner, if you look at the history. But what they represent now is they represent, the ability for a large number of people to come in and potentially make a joint bid. That might come from Rio, that might come from others, but it increases that possibility. And then, of course, it increases the possibility that Rio makes a bid, because it makes that bid, a joint bid takes a little bit more time. It's easier to sell to your board. Now, in terms of whether or not that they're going to work together and what that looks like, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, Rio Tinto is known for, as long as the public has, so 2 weeks. I don't think they've had deep discussions yet, but I know that they have talked to each other. So, had initial conversations and said, let's talk.
Okay, so 5% plus 7.84%, so less than 13% between them. Does that give scope for others to come in, or is your hope here? Because your ultimate goal here, as you've told me many times, is a sale, right? You're not going to go and raise the money and destroy, your shareholder, or you're not going to dilute that out of your shareholders by doing that, right?
Well, I mean, if we end up with 2 billion market cap from here or somewhere else, then maybe I'll rethink it. But I mean, it's creating shareholder value, right? And shareholder value right now is selling at the valuation. So, but you hit the nail on the head. It's a very, very good point. So, like, why is everyone at 7.8 and 5? Why all these low investments? I mean, specifically for that reason. Like, we want these groups on the register. To be honest, that working particularly, I mean, we'll see it. I'm excited about Mitsubishi. The work we did with Rio was excellent. I mean, added tremendous value to the project. I mean, we had teams of their experts helping us, go through bits and pieces of it. But we want to make sure that if there's anybody else out there that's interested, and I'm going to come back to that, they're not scared off. They're like, okay, Rio's got less than 8%, like you said, less than 13% overall. Like, this is not a blocking position. We don't want anyone to have a blocking position. You want a blocking position? Own 100%. You can block anybody all day long.
Absolutely. No, that's where it's going. You know where I'm going, because I've mentioned this to you before, because that competitive tension is really, really important, because as soon as that goes, your leverage goes. And at 13%, it kind of is, you're still in control, as it were. To move from competitive tension to, I guess, a comfortable consolidation, or however you want to frame it, is not necessarily a good thing for you and your shareholders. So let's talk about the monies that have come in. You've issued some more shares, so some more monies have come in. Last time out, we talked about the need to kind of get the permitting over the line. That was $20 million back in September for that whole process. So I don't know how much you'd spent to that point, and how much more you've got to allocate to that process. But permitting is a kind of big moment, which may again drive interest in, and drive that share price of yours. So where are you with that?
Yeah, I mean, so permitting, I mean, that is the sole focus this year. Well, I shouldn't say it's the sole focus. But two focuses. One is working through, the work with Mitsubishi, which they've got some, as I said, very interested in concentrate quality. Work through that. So that's one of the things we're doing. That's the small part. The big part is all on permitting. So the goal is to get our applications submitted early 2024. After that, it's 3 years. So, I mean, it's early stages, but what's important about sort of getting all this going, I mean, back to your earlier comment about competitive tension here, we need to keep this thing moving. We need to sort of say, look, if the Rios, the Mitsubishis, others that are interested in this project really want to get involved with this, they really should get involved before we get the permits in. Because, I mean, you don't want to be flexing the First Nations, the community, the government, the regulator. Oh, here's the project. And then these guys come in, well, we're going to change, because they always change a couple things, right? We're going to change this, we're going to change that. And then they're like, oh, well, we just went through all this with Paul and Sheena, my VP of environment. Like, guys, come on. So, it's in the next 6 to 8 months here, we should have a clear idea of, I think, the group of people, or the at least, or whether or not it's sold, whether or not it's a different sort of situation. But, all these things need to sort of get finalized over the next 6 months. I mean, our agreement with Rio expires this November 28th. So that's obviously a deadline that comes up. So that's, timing wise, makes a lot of sense as well.
So remind us again, what happens on that date when it will expire? What have they got to do to continue the relationship, or what happens if they step away?
So, I mean, if they do nothing and we do nothing, they become a 7.84% shareholder, and they have no rights. Right now, they've got a board observer, they've got a seat on the technical committee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they become a shareholder. And if they want to extend their rights, if they want to do any of that, that's a complete new negotiation. So very different than what happened last November. Last November, that was built into the original agreement. It was like, you send us a letter, it extends for a year. That's not in the cards this time. So it's like, if they're not done, if we want to look at something new, that's certainly a possibility. That's not anything that's being discussed. But that's it. I mean, everything is a new negotiation with Rio. Past.
So in a way, that's good, because that frees you up in a way that you haven't been for a while. You've kind of been tied down to the same sort of broad parameters of the previous agreements. This could be a fresh start, because I guess if I'm looking into this thing, right, you don't need to go drilling for any more pounds or any more ounces, right? We're clear. That's the good news. But unless you want to tell me I can find higher grade or better economics, and maybe that's a whole other discussion. But let's assume you don't need to do that. But what you do need, for me as a shareholder looking at this thing, is to go, well, what are my levers available to me to kind of drive any premium from whatever the price is today, or whatever the price is at that point of negotiation? Because we're seeing some, 20, 30% premiums being paid out there in a kind of very difficult market, and in the context of equities, but in context of gold price, it's almost criminal what people are picking stuff up for. So what's available to you in those discussions, in those negotiations? What can you point to? What do they already know that allows you to have a sensible adult conversation, rather than, well, your share price is X, we'll give you X plus 0.3.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that, I mean, and this is the advantage of having a big project. The one advantage of having a big project with not a big market cap that is appropriate with it. I mean, we've got a project that I'll be honest. I mean, when you run the economics of our project at spot, $4 copper, actually $18.50 gold. So this was about a month ago. The project has a 5.3 billion net present value. Okay, so our market cap right now,
but it's got a 3 billion capex, right?
A 3.6 billion capex.
3.6 billion capex, right? Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the NPV is after you pay for that capex. So after you pay for that capex, you're making $5.3 billion. So that's the value. And right now our market cap is sitting, well, it's up a bit, of course, on the back of these investments, but let's say $360 million. You could pay 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80% premium, and your return on investment is still significant.
I know, but my point is, it's great saying that, but look, you're not buddies drinking over a pint of beer here, and they're going to feel sorry for you. Well, let's give you a little bit more because you're a good guy. Well, they're gonna try and get the best deal possible for their shareholders. You've got to get the best deal possible for your shareholders. I'm just wondering what that conversation looks like in terms of who's in control of that conversation? Because I mean, you could argue I don't need to sell.
I mean, I've already started the conversation. 5.3 billion net present value, and you're paying, like I said, with any of those premiums, it doesn't even, it's almost a rounding error in terms of what the return on investment that would mean for someone like Rio or somebody else making that bid, right? I mean, that's the argument I make. The argument they make is the argument you were making. Well, there's these transactions out there that have had low premiums. Yes and no. I mean, you start to see, look at Rio. Rio bought, the part of Turquoise Hill that they didn't own. Final premium, I believe it was 56%. You look at Glencore Tech. I mean, that's now gone up earlier this week. That's up into, where's that sitting? I think it's in the 40s now, right? So yeah, there's some low premium mergers, but battery metal assets, copper in particular, in jurisdictions, and I'd like to come back and talk about jurisdiction because it's quite interesting. A little bit more information on that, and advanced good relationship with the local indigenous groups, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, can you name 3? Probably not. Like, there's very, very few of them. And that's why we continue to get the interest. And, we've got the interest obviously from Rio. We've got the interest now from Mitsubishi Materials. I've signed 2 confidentiality agreements with top 5 copper producers in the past 3 months. Like, it's astounding. To be honest, what's astounding is, like, we knocked on their door a year ago and, at the back of the Rio investment, they're like, yeah, no, we're doing other stuff. And then they came, yeah, okay. All right, Paul. Yeah, we should take a look here. And
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, Paul. Let's talk about that. I do want to come back to jurisdiction in a second, because what we're seeing out there in the market, obviously, gold, $2,000. Who doesn't like that? Really nice. In fact, you've got analysts, and newsletter writers and bankers over here in Zurich talking about $2,500 gold by the end of this year. They always say that, but there's some more credible people saying it, which is interesting. But the equities aren't moving. Where people are looking in seems to be the battery metals, seems to be the coppers, the nickels of this world. The copper, I guess you're sitting on both camps, which is great for you. It's great because the gold price is fantastic and looks like it will continue to run with this economy. But copper, I think and we say with gold, people are a little bit uncertain about, maybe how that's operated for in the last 2 years. It hasn't followed the norms. So, will it start reverting back to the norms in terms of where that goes? But copper, there's no uncertainty there. Copper forecasts in terms of infrastructure, in terms of battery metals, of whatever kind, electric vehicles or otherwise, it's going through the roof. Copper is what people want. Copper is what investors are turning up to see at conferences. So is that, and sorry to keep coming back to this, what leverage do you have? Does the copper give you leverage to bring in more back to competitive tension? Other interested parties. So signing 3 NDAs is pretty meaningful here. Is that where you're going with this? Is that
that's in the past 3 months. There was a whole whack last year as well. Like I said, there's been 3 in the last 3 months. So what's interesting, and what's interesting with our deposit, as I said, 11 billion pounds of copper, 21 million ounces of gold, and so always more copper than gold, but 21 million ounces of gold. So what's interesting is that we're getting interest from the copper guys, but the gold guys have always, I have had more, going back, I've had more, good-sized gold companies, mid-tier gold companies come look at our asset than copper. And because, 21 million ounces of gold, that is, again, it's a rare beast. And as we've seen now with, Agnico Eagle making their investment with Teck and St. Nicholas and Newcrest and Newmont, and part of that story is Newmont wanting a bit more exposure into copper, and they get that with Newcrest, is that the gold companies they want a little more copper into their portfolio. So that's another thing, what better asset than an asset like ours with 21 million ounces of gold. You get the copper, it's still mostly a copper deposit, but you also get a significant amount of gold. Well, it's a bit of a high capital cost for a gold company. Oh, wait a second. Got a pretty good partner in there with Mitsubishi Materials. So that's part of the thought process around, us being very excited to have Mitsubishi as part of the balance sheet.
But okay, I'm going to come back. I was going to come at you like an investor, which is your end of February, $2, so at 255 now. I think that's possibly gold sentiment moving that. Maybe, I don't know. You've got your job as CEO is to drive that share price as high as it can be by the time you get into negotiations with Rio, the end of this year. It's always your responsibility to drive the share price. It's come off the back of a very difficult 2022. We saw that most people kind of came off a lot. And obviously it's a kind of, okay, we'll submit permits by, let's say Q1 24, then it's you said 3 year, or was it 2 year?
3
year, right? Okay. You got a ways to go. So why is now a good time to buy your stock, and what is going to move it? What is the thing that's going to move this? Why should I be buying into this advanced development story now?
Yeah, so what moves our stock, right? What moves our stock right now? As you said, we went from $2 to $2.50. What has driven that? So if you look at what has driven that this year, about half of that has been gold price, copper price. And about the other half of that has been, to be honest, if you go back 2 weeks ago, we were probably 225. So another half of that is the Mitsubishi investment and the Rio top-up investment. So what do we have to look forward to over the second half of the year? So as you said, let's I'm going to walk back exactly the things that you talked about. So let's start with gold. So gold, we were chatting earlier about this. I'm a practical guy. I'm an engineer by background, so I don't have wild theories on gold. But I know one thing is that when people stop investing in the U.S. dollar, they begin to invest in gold. That's why we've seen it move up now, because there hasn't been these huge rate increases. All the indications out of the U.S. Fed is that that's going to drop. The U.S. dollar is going to be less attractive. That's going to move money into gold. We've seen the beginning of that. Where it goes, I don't know, but we're not going back down to $1,700 gold. That I know for sure. Copper, sky's the limit. I was at, this is a month ago now, but I was at PDAC and I was talking actually to the CRU guys, conservative think tank, copper, market modelers. They were saying $5 copper before the end of this year. These aren't arm waiver guys. These are very, very conservative guys. And then, the last thing is, so those things drive up. So again, why buy now? Those drive up the share price. What else drives up the share price? We just saw in the past 2 weeks, new agreements with Rio. We need to be sitting down and negotiating what's next with Rio before the end of the year. Really that should be negotiated and finalized and signed by the time our current agreement expires on November 28th. Is that a purchase? Is that a new agreement? But the reality, what I can say right now, we've got a good relationship. They like the asset. We'll see where that goes. But all those things lead to a better share price.
So if you like copper and you like where that's going, if you like gold and you like where that's going, this is a project you can look at, endorsed by Rio Mitsubishi. Great. So in terms of the conversation at the end of the year, that's a long ways away. Do you start having early conversations? That's when you've got to do it by, presumably, or do they need to just inform you that they want the right to renegotiate or to negotiate? What happens between now and then? Anything?
Like I said, there is no provision. It could be, they could come anyhow. We need to negotiate something.
They could come next week
before the end of the year. There's no rights within the current agreement. So everything, it's like, the chariot turns back into a pumpkin and everyone goes home on November 28th, unless the shoe fits, sort of idea, right? So that's something needs to be negotiated before that 28th, or they just go back to being a shareholder. Now, could it happen after that? Sure. They're still a shareholder, but it's, it's the most sort of straightforward, and it provides continuity if we do that before that.
How's money? Obviously, you just got a chunk of money in. I don't know what the money position was like before that. So where does current cash flow get you through to? Presumably beyond the end of this year.
Yes. So we started the year with 23 million. We just brought in 23 million, so we're sitting at around 46. This year's the heavy lifting on permitting. So I mean, budget this year runs around $20 million to get that permit application. I mean, because it's putting together. I mean, the permit application is, you measure it in feet of binders and paper, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. Anyhow, that goes in the end of this year. So this is a bit of a heavy lifting year. After that, it's actually much more modest in terms of budgets as you sort of babysit the project through permitting. We're certainly sitting in a very, very enviable position in this market because, as I think I mean, we've got good commodity prices, but we're not seeing the investors sort of not seeing a lot of the equity market is challenging. And so pretty excited to also have that $23 million to continue moving things forward.
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously. And it's kind of an important point, actually, because I think what we saw last year, people kind of, raised money at, in the middle of an inflationary environment. I think they were beaten down by shareholders saying, well, why do that now? But by the beginning of this year, it kind of looked like genius because the cost of money right now is pretty expensive, right? It's not a nice market to go and have those conversations. One, because share prices are depressed, so therefore the cost of money is more expensive. But there's not necessarily a lot of it wanting to be placed by investors at the moment. I'm not talking retail. I'm talking banks and institutional guys. So for capex projects, it's a lot harder out there at the moment. So you obviously be quite pleased with this money coming in right now.
No, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, we talk to funds, and I mean, the good news is we're not going there cap in hand. We're just talking to them and they're like, look, we're sitting on cash. I'm supposed to deploy it, but I'm not sure which way the wind's blowing. I'm not sure. I think that there's beginning to be a bit more consensus around gold. Copper is an easier investment. Of interest to some of these conferences, these mining conferences. I was at the BMO conference in Florida, met with a couple of funds, new funds we never met with. Very excited to sit down and talk to them. We're only investing in battery metals. And, you look at who shows up at any mining conference, and the BMO conference is no different. It is 3/4 gold companies and 1/4 base metals. And I'm like, oh, well, you must have a fairly scattered schedule. And she's, there's not a lot. There's not a lot. I mean, there's more and more, of course, and, the market follows these desires. But, and so not only that, but, when we do these deals like we did with Rio Tinto and with Mitsubishi Materials, not only is it, good to get any money in the door in this market right now, but we also did that at a premium. So it was a 15% premium to the 20-day VWAP, is what we negotiated with Mitsubishi. So, it's actually a premium that money is coming in at, which, again, it's great for shareholders, great, of the company.
And I know I've kind of asked you this in a different way, but I'm going to ask you more bluntly. Whatever people's view on gold may or may not be, whatever view of people's view of copper, those are things out of your control. In terms of things that you're in control of, or the things that you would point to, the things that you value within your organization, why now? Why should I be putting my money in now? And I appreciate I've asked you that before. Just trying to get a different answer, not different answer, but a different kind of response from you, because I'm looking at all the options I've got available to me. I've got all these producers out there who are benefiting from the increase in gold price, the increase in copper price. That would seem, apart from physical, that would seem a really smart place for me to start. But developers are, the value of developers at the moment seems exceedingly low at the moment. They have been hit as hard as explorers, yet they're significantly more de-risked, right? And I'm trying to work out if that thesis is right. Should I be investing in developers now, And will I get that leg up, that leverage that I'm looking for, that Saxon sizzle?
You answered my
Okay,
question.
cool. Thanks
I
very
mean,
much, Paul. Great speaking to you today.
you invest. I mean, I mean, this is sort of investing 101, right? It's like find the unloved sector and put some money in it. And explore codes as well. But the development companies are an unloved sector. So then you look in that sector and you say, okay, in this unloved sector, where do I feel comfortable putting my money? And so you look at, our company and then the asset, the casino asset. In the Yukon, Canada, significant size, and recent. We're talking yesterday endorsement from the second largest copper company in the world was Rio Tinto, and one of the largest copper smelting companies in the world 2 weeks ago, Mitsubishi Materials. And then you've got that just general unloved in copper and gold. And then more importantly, I think you've got, as I said, something needs to be negotiated with Rio Tinto before the end of the year. I'm hoping it's a buyout, but that it remains to be seen. But even if it isn't, based upon the relationship that we have with them now, based upon my understanding of their valuation and the work we've done together and all of that, my anticipation is that we'll be able to negotiate whatever it looks like, something that will be beneficial to the shareholders, the company, and the project moving forward.